La musique, says Marmontel, in those contes moraux, which in all our translations we have insisted upon calling moral tales, as if in mockery of their spirit. Here he contends the pleasure derivable from sweet sounds with the capacity for creating them. No more than any other talent is that for music susceptible for complete enjoyment, where there is no other second party to appreciate its exercise. And it is only common with other talents that it produces effects which may be fully enjoyed in solitude. The idea which the raconteur has either failed to entertain clearly or has sacrificed in its expression to his national love of point is doubtless the very tenable one, that the higher order of music is the most thoroughly estimated when we are exclusively alone. The proposition in this form will be admitted at once by those who love the lyre for its own sake and for its spiritual uses. But there is one pleasure still within the reach of fallen mortality, and perhaps the only one, which owes even more than does music to the accessory sentiment of seclusion. I mean the happiness experienced in the contemplation of natural scenery. In truth, the man who would behold aright the glory of God upon earth must in solitude behold that glory. To me, at least, the presence not of human life only, but of life in any other form than that of which the green things which grow upon the soil and are voiceless is a stain upon the landscape, is at war with the genius of the scene. I love, indeed, to regard the dark valleys, the gray rocks, and the waters that silently smile when for the forests that sigh in uneasy slumbers, and the proud, watchful mountains that look down upon all. I love to regard these not only as themselves, but the colossal members of one vast, animate, and sentient whole, a whole whose form, that of the sphere, is the most perfect and most inclusive of all, whose path is among associate planets, whose meek handmaiden is the moon, whose mediate sovereign is the sun, whose life is eternity, whose thought is that of a God, whose enjoyment is knowledge, whose destinies are lost in immensity, whose cognizance of ourselves is akin with our own cognizance of the animalculae which infest the brain, a being with which we, in consequence, regard as purely inanimate and material. Much in the same manner as these animalculae must regard us. Our telescopes and our mathematical investigations assure us that on every hand, notwithstanding the cant of the more ignorant of the priesthood, that space, and therefore that bulk, is an important consideration in the eyes of the Almighty. The circles in which the stars move are those best adapted for the evolution, without collision, of the greatest possible number of bodies. The forms of those bodies are accurately such as that when within a given surface to include the greatest possible amount of matter, while the surfaces themselves are so disposed as to accommodate a denser population that could be accommodated on the same surfaces otherwise arranged. Nor is it any argument against bulk being an object with God that space is infinite. For there may be an infinity of matter to fill it. And since we see clearly the endowment of matter with vitality is a principle, indeed, as far as our judgments extend, the leading principle is in the operations of deity, it is scarcely logical to imagine it confined to the regions of the minute, where we daily trace it. And not extending to those of the august. As we find cycle within cycle without end, yet all revolving around one far distant center, which is the Godhead. May we not analogically suppose in the same manner life within life, the less within the greater, and all within the spirit divine? In short, we are madly erring through self-esteem and believing man in either his temporal or future destinies to be more of moment in the universe than that vast quote-unquote clod of the valley which he tills and contemns, into which he denies a soul for no more profound reason than he does not behold it in operation. These fancies, such as these, have always given to my meditations among the mountains and the forests, by the rivers and the ocean, a tinge of what the everyday world would not fail to term fantastique. My wanderings amid such scenes have been many and far-searching, often solitary, in the interest with which I have strained through many a dim valley, or gazed into the reflected heaven of many a bright lake, have been an interest greatly deepened by the thought that I have strayed and gazed alone. What flippant Frenchman was it who said it in the illusion of the well-known work of Zimmerman that the epigram cannot be gainsaid, but the necessity is the thing that does not exist. It was during one of my lonely journeys and amid a far distant region of mountain locked within mountain, and sad rivers and melancholy tarns, writhing or sleeping within all, that I chanced upon a certain rivulet in Ireland. I came upon these suddenly in the leafy June, and threw myself upon the turf, beneath the branches of an unknown odorous shrub. That I might doze as I contemplated the scene. I thought that thus only should I look upon it, such was the character of the phantasm which it wore. On all sides, save to the west, where the sun was about sinking, or was a verdant walls of the forest. The little river, which turned sharply in its course and was thus immediately lost to sight, seemed to have no exit from its prison. But to be absorbed by the deep green foliage of the trees of the east. While in the opposite quarter, so it appeared to me as I lay at length and glanced upward, there poured down noiselessly and continuously into the valley a rich golden crimson waterfall from the sunset fountains of the sky. About midway into the short vista which my dreamy vision took in, one small circular island, profusely verdured, reposed upon the bosom of the stream, so blended bank and shadow there that each seemed tenuous in air. So mirror-like was the glassy water that it was scarcely possible to say at what point upon the slope of the emerald turf its crystal dominion began. My position enabled me to include a single view both of the eastern and western extremities of the islet, and I observed a singularly marked difference in their aspects. The latter was of one radiant harem of garden beauties. It glowed and blushed beneath the eye of the slant sunlight and fairly laughed with flowers. The grass was short, springy, sweet, scented, and asphodel interspersed. The trees were lithe, mirthful, erect, bright, slender, and graceful. Of eastern figure and foliage, with bark smooth, glossy, and party-colored, there seemed a deep sense of life and joy about all, and although no airs blew from out of the heavens, yet everything in motion through the gentle sweepings to and fro of innumerable butterflies that might have been mistaken for tulips with wings. The other or eastern end of the isle was whelmed in the blackest shade. A somber yet beautiful and peaceful gloom here pervaded things. The trees were dark in color and mournful in form and attitude, wreathing themselves into sad, solemn, and spectral shapes that conveyed ideas of mortal sorrow and untimely death. The grass wore the deep tint of the cypress, and the heads of its blades hung droopily and hither and thither. Among it were small, unsightly hillocks, low and narrow and not very long, that had the aspect of graves, but were not, although over and all above them the rue and rosemary clambered. The shade of the trees fell heavily upon the water, and there seemed to bury itself therein, impregnating the depths of the element with darkness. I fancied that each shadow, as the sun descended lower and lower, separated itself solemnly from the trunk that gave it birth, and thus became absorbed by the stream. While the others issued momently from the trees, taking in the place of their predecessors thus entombed. This idea having once seized upon my fancy, greatly excited it, and I lost myself forthwith in reverie. If ever Allan were enchanted, said I to myself, this is it. This is the haunt of the few gentle fays who remained from the wreck of the race. Are these green tombs theirs? Or do they yield up their sweet lives as the mankind yield up their own, and did they not waste away mournfully, rendering it unto God little by little their existence? As these trees render up shadow after shadow, exhausting their substance unto dissolution? What the wasting tree is to water that imbibes its shade, thus growing blacker by what it preys upon, may not the life of the fey be to death which engulfs it? As I thus mused with half-shut eyes, while the sun sank rapidly to rest, and eddying currents careered around and around the island, bearing upon their bosom large, dazzling white flakes of the bark of the sycamore, flakes which in their multiform positions upon the water a quick imagination might have converted into anything it pleased. While I thus mused, it seemed to me that the form of one of these very fays, about whom I have been pondering, made its way slowly into darkness from out of the light at the western end of the island. She stood erect in a singularly fragile canoe and urged it with mere phantoms of an oar. While within the influence of the lingering sunbeams, her attitude seemed indicative of joy, but sorrow deformed it as she passed within the shade. Slowly she guided along, and at length rounded the islet and re-entered the region of light. The revolution of which has just been made by the Fae, continued I, musingly. It's a cycle of the brief year of her life. She has floated through the winter and through her summer. She is a year nearer unto death, for I did not fail to see that, as she came into the shade, her shadow fell from her. And was swallowed up in the dark water, making its blackness more black. And again the boat appeared in the Fae. But about the attitude of the latter, there was more of care than an uncertainty, and less of elastic joy. She floated again from out of the light and into the gloom, which deepened momently, and again her shadow fell from her into the ebony water. And became absorbed into its blackness, and again she made the circuit of the island, while the sun rushed down to its slumbers. At each issuing into the light there was more sorrow about a person, while it grew feebler and far fainter and more indistinct, and at each passage into the gloom there fell from her a darker shade, which became whelmed in a shadow more black. And at length, when the sun had utterly departed the Fae, now the mere ghost of her former self went disconsolately with her boat into the region of the ebony flood. And there she issued, thence at all I cannot say, for darkness fell over all things, and I beheld her magical figure no more.